Oh no, we're live. Okay, well then.
Hey,
Hey everybody. I myself, I am Eloy from Prince's Friend. I'm the host of that YouTube channel. Huge Prince enthusiast, and I'm going to be a panelist here, but also pseudo moderator. So that's why I get to talk first. It's a luxury I get to enjoy here. But first, I obviously want to give everybody else a chance to go ahead and introduce themselves as well. Go ahead, Roy.
Hey, I'm Roy Turner. I'm a filmmaker and a podcaster. We have had a whole array of Prince alumni. If you guys have been enjoying Graffiti Bridge symposium this week, we've had a lot of the cast members on that as well. So if you need more, I'll give you a link later so y'all can check all that out. So glad y'all are joining us.
All right, Tonya.
hi, I'm Tonya Pendleton. I'm a writer with thegrio.com, and I am a longtime entertainment journalist, writer, web content creator, all of those good things, and someone who's here because I guess I have something to offer in terms of the overall Prince world.
Everybody has something to offer.
That's right.
All right, Kim and Casey.
Hey everyone, I'm Casey Rain with The Violet Reality.
I'm Camilia. Hi.
Yep. And you may or may not know that we run a YouTube channel, The Violet Reality, and a blog as well, where we cover a lot of music-related stuff, mostly focused on Prince. We've been very lucky over the past few years to have gone out to Celebration and been asked to cover it by the estate in Paisley Park. And we've had two series that have really got us a lot of attention on our YouTube channel. One of them is our Uncovering Prince series, where we've been out and about interviewing people like Anna Fantastic and the NPG, and lots of awesome folks. And then the more recent series we've been doing is The Facts You Didn't Know, where we uncover lots of deep facts about each one of Prince's albums. And it's been very enjoyable to make both of those things.
And they are fantastic, by the way. I love those.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
And this panel is going to be about all of, what is it? The current state of the Prince world, I think is what it's called. We're going to be talking about...
Union.
What's that?
State of the Purple Union is what it's
Right.
called.
That's the name. There you go. And we're going to be talking about all of the posthumous releases and events and all of that stuff and how it's all kind of, you know, impacting the ongoing legacy of Prince. And obviously we've had two kind of full deluxe, you know, versions with a third on the way. There's a lot of rumors about that. We have several re-releases of hard to find or rare, you know, Prince albums. We've had other releases like the originals or Piano and a Microphone 1983. And obviously we've had the different performances. We've had the symphonic tribute. We've had the celebrations. We've had live on the big screen. So just to kind of get a general read of this room, of the panels here, what are your current thoughts on how good a job the estate's been doing with kind of keeping Prince's legacy out there and his name out there? Scale from 1 to 10 and why? Start with Tonya.
You have to start with me first.
We'll start, we don't have to. We can
no, that's fine. I think that the estate has done a fairly good job at keeping at least Prince in the mindset of people, both fans both new and old. I would love to see a little bit more collaboration. One of the things that I've realized is that there were kind of 4 sets of people that really kept Prince in the forefront during his lifetime. And those were fans, journalists, collaborators, and other musicians. Mm-hmm. And my feeling is that one of the things that they have not done is tapped into that universe of people that could be there figuring out ways to engage people, bring in more fans, work on some of the re-releases or new releases. I feel like Prince was an intensely creative person who was always innovating, always thinking of new things, always making more music, always coming up with new ideas. And I feel like if there's anything that is lacking, it is that sense of collaborative spirit and that engagement that those 4 groups of people could have in bringing some creative projects to the forefront. So if I had to go 1 to 10, I would give them maybe a 6.5 at this point.
Okay. That's not a bad score. Just so everybody's
yeah. I mean, you know, for keeping his legacy and his name out there. I think with the recent special, the CBS special, Let's Go Crazy, that was something that he deserved, an honor that he certainly deserved. But people watched it, they were engaged with it. And then the YouTube concert, which people watched as though they were, and I guess some people were seeing it for the first time. It raised money for charity, and people were very engaged in that. So I think those kind of interactive things are wonderful for the estate, and hopefully we'll see more of those.
I agree. What do you guys think, Violet Reality?
So I think, first of all, one thing that I want to point out is that I see this quite often. And I don't always have time to try and sort of explain and educate people, but I think there are people out there who see the estate as sort of this amorphous blob, and they don't understand the structure of it. So actually, you've got Paisley Park operating as basically an independent entity, even though the estate are in control of it. That didn't used to be the case. It used to be Graceland, and they were at odds sometimes with the family and the estate.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the family as a separate entity. Actually, the family do not have a great deal of input on the estate, only as much as the estate want them to have. And whether you see that as a good or a bad thing is dependent on how you feel about them. Some of the members of Prince's family they've started lawsuits against the estate because they're not happy with how the level of input they're being allowed to have. So, and then you've got Comerica Bank, Troy Carter operating as the entertainment advisor, doing deals with major record labels for the music and audio releases. And these are all kind of operating, more now it's operating more like a well-oiled machine, at least as far as Paisley and Comerica, more so than it was before. So I always see a lot of people kind of tagging, they're like, oh, at Paisley Park, when is Sign of the Times? Like, you're talking to the wrong people. Like, they don't know. Right. So I just wanted to make that clear. So depending on kind of how you which part of it you're looking at, that kind of informs the context of who you think is doing a great job or not, and additionally, in all of those sections, or at least as far as the estate and Paisley, you're looking at multiple kind of entities in that historical context over the last 4 years as well. So right after Prince died, you had Bremer Bank and Londell Macmillan kind of running the estate stuff for a year or however long it was. Mm-hmm. And then there was this kind of fallout and the deal with Universal that all went sour, and they had to give a bunch of money back or whatever. And then, then Comerica came in and Troy came in, and it became a different kind of thing. And, similar to Graceland and now not Graceland. So, so that's kind of when people say, oh, I think this has been done well or that was not done well, you have to understand who was making those decisions at the time to kind of inform it. And because of all of that, I think it was very rocky at the beginning. I think there was a lot of things that didn't go as smoothly as they could have done. But now the recent stuff, 1999 Deluxe, just look at how incredible that was. I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan as well. I'm in all the Michael Jackson fan groups, and every time there's something whether it's this leak about Sign of the Times Deluxe or 1999 Deluxe, they're all posting it saying, why can't we have something this good, right? And if you look at other posthumous estates of a bunch of other artists, they're not operating anywhere near at this level of putting out this amount of unreleased music and footage and other projects like books and merch and all this stuff. So for me, I think, comparatively in a wider context, they've been doing a great job. I would say right now, probably 8 out of 10 for me.
Kim, you concur or?
I think it's basically some kind of the same thing for me. Although for me, I also have to look at it from a perspective of someone a bit younger, because I grew up having quite a hard time finding all of Prince's music and stuff because it wasn't on YouTube, wasn't on Spotify and all that stuff. So I really do appreciate that they put all of that back out there, and they do the YouTube special. So you had the Holly Rock animated thing. That was amazing. More of that would be fantastic for unreleased songs. So I'd love that. And also I think that I love how much unreleased stuff they've been releasing, but for me, they could do it at a much, much faster pace so that it just gets out there and people get to hear it.
All right.
Yeah.
Roy, what do you think?
Well, I'll echo a lot. I might have a little bit of a lower score than 6.5, but I have a lot of positive things to say. To echo what Casey was saying about the timing, because when it first started out, there was quite a few tone deaf things that came out. I think that that what they were buckling to was that, first of all, there's this need to put these things out and put these things out very, very quickly. As much as, Kim, as you think that they're not going as quickly, I think that there's much more pressure to put things out much quicker. So, but now with the archivist that Michael Howe is involved, who is somebody who is, he has his finger on the pulse of what's going on. You know, under his watch, you're not really going to see a whole lot of, you know, purple vinyl copies of 3121, if you know what I'm saying. You know, like that was, you know, but I also sympathize. I know there's this kind of this almost aggression towards the estate of kind of like, you know, we all think of how we think, this is how we would do it, and this is how the right way it should be done, and this is all so personal to us. But like I said, I'm a filmmaker right in the middle of a production right now. If something happened to me and my sister, who I don't see that often, had to come in and finish this movie, where, you know, she wouldn't even know where to begin. So I think that now that, and it's such a massive undertaking, that now in the beginning I found it to be a bit tone deaf, but now, again, also with Michael Howe's you know, involvement and somebody that was there and kind of lived it a little bit, I wanted to show you, for those that are out there that haven't seen, if you really haven't actually held this thing in your hand. I did do an unboxing video of this also on our YouTube channel called Tricky Kid TV. And the very first thing that I do when I open this thing is I actually have a scale, like a human scale that you stand on in your bathroom, next to it. So you can see that this thing weighs 10 pounds. And I think that the greatest thing that probably came out of this box set, and there's so much there, there's two things. One is the masses finally get to hear what all of us tape collectors, for those who don't know me, those that do know me know that I was a major tape trader dating all the way back from the early 1990s. And I wrote to Brown Mark when I was like 19 and was able to get a lot of stuff. But the masses are able to finally hear Purple Music, the song. And if you haven't heard that, that's a career all by itself right there.
Yes.
But secondly, to kind of connect this to the Graffiti Bridge Symposium, is that people are finally getting to hear the original version of New Power Generation, which was called Bold Generation. I'll leave you with this for this part just for now, but I always had wondered if Prince actually self-circulated, because a lot of the stuff that I have now compared to this is totally inferior. Like, this is the master copy. This is the real deal. Because I've had Bold Generation and Purple Music for years, but what you're hearing on this box set is incredible. And when you get to hear it within the context of the 1999 sphere, it takes on a completely different meaning. I mean, a lot of people kind of question if he ever expanded properly on this stuff later on. That was kind of the criticism of Graffiti Bridge, was that songs like I Can't Stop This Feeling I Got, and things that were around at that time, did they ever get better? Well, you know, I guess that's kind of objective, but it meant something to him that he ended up naming his second band after something he created within this thing. So the statement that he makes on 1999 versus the statement he makes on Graffiti Bridge aren't that too disparaging, you know what I mean? So, but in terms of the current state of right now, I thought the book was great. I think that the book could have been better if it had been just Dan Piepenbring's story about his experience entirely, with these little things inserted as Prince's voice being projected, as compared to being kind of like through a series of what feels like flashbacks. But that's just my own way of thinking. But in terms of everything that I've heard, I can only imagine Michael Howe walking into that vault and finding that 1983 Prince and a microphone that was done in one take at his house previous to Paisley Park, and just going, okay, this has got to be the next thing that comes out. So,
yeah.
So that's 5.5.
5.5.
Right, but I mean, I think again, there are varying stakeholders in sort of the Prince universe or the Prince world at this point, and each stakeholder wants something different. So hardcore diehard fans, which all of us probably are to a certain degree, we want all the new stuff. And then there are people who want the stuff that is new to them. And then there are people who want to see more footage. I mean, 400 hours of footage that really is owned by the estate or the entities that comprise the estate, that has little of that has seen the light of day in 4 years. So you've got to question what's happening with that, but you've also got to question, to Casey's point, that there are varying entities that make up the estate. So who is really in charge of the creative decision making at this point? And you also have to look at the fact that there are people who follow Prince the person, the actual existing person who existed. There are people who follow Prince the musician, and now there's the brand. And these are all very different things, because at the end of the day, this is still the music business. So Prince the person is no longer here. And there are certain fan sites that I'm sure we're all familiar with that really are into him as a person and still trying to figure out who he was as a person. Right. And then you have the people who are looking to his musical output and the things that he did and the innovations that he's made. Obviously, someone like a Questlove, if you've listened to any of his DJ sets, and he's explaining some of the intricate musical things that Prince did and those innovations, that's very fascinating to people who are music and into that technical stuff. And then there's Prince the brand. And Prince the brand right now is being sold in a certain kind of way. And I think one of the things to bring us into current events is that Prince the brand is being sold for the money. I mean, because that's just the reality. That's, people are going to make money off of this brand. But who actually has the say and who is controlling the brand? And when I mentioned current events, Prince was an activist in a lot of ways. He was doing things behind the scenes that people weren't as familiar with. And I think at this point is the branding of Prince obscuring who Prince actually was in his music and in his lifetime and in his activism. And with Minneapolis being so much a part of today's current news cycle and current events and reflecting the changes that are happening very rapidly in the larger society, is Prince being represented as an individual who would have had to say or brought forth some healing or brought us more information or contributed in some way to what is going on there? And I think that what is happening is that the branding of Prince is a little bit different than maybe what a lot of us experienced when he was still here. And I would hate to see, although I have on a Prince t-shirt right now, that the branding of Prince becomes all about merchandising and memorabilia and Funko Pops and all of those things, as opposed to it being about his larger importance in the pop culture landscape, his importance in particular to African Americans, and even what he did. Casey, you referenced Michael Jackson, what Michael, what Whitney, what Janet Jackson and all of those people did for the state of Black music and for the state of crossover significance, because the story of the 80s is all of these Black artists really becoming multi-global superstars based on the fact that at that time, their crossing over was significant to the entire cultural landscape.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and to even echo a little bit of that, I myself have had, the last several years to kind of go through, and I've been looking at every one of these things kind of under a microscope and, talking about it on a weekly basis and, and everything. Like, I put my opinions out there, pretty strongly. But I agree with you entirely. I feel like, though, even though there are the different aspects of Prince, as the brand, as the person, as the music, obviously the music is the biggest one, and the music being the biggest one allows for the other two to even be a factor. No one would care who the guy was if his music wasn't amazing. They couldn't sell his name or t-shirts or whatever if his music wasn't amazing. So like, that's where I'm at. So I'm like, it's cool that they're doing this and that and the other thing. The music is the big thing. That's what I'm here for.
Well, for sure. And I'm just grateful that we're getting anything. Casey, you mentioned about being a big Michael Jackson fan. I am as well. And a lot of the stuff that came out after, seemed very subpar. It seemed like it was just cut and paste and things like that. And so thankfully, there hasn't been a whole lot of that, if any of that, thankfully. But I think that, you have to actually look at the actual process, like combining everything that we're talking about here. Michael Howe goes into the vault, he finds something special. Then what do we have to filter that through? We have to filter it through, again, who was handling the estate at the time, who was okaying things. then to echo what Tonya was saying, then you have to then filter that through the machine, the process of how these things actually do get released through in the microcosm of the music industry, and then it comes out to the public. So I know idealistically they would want to go in chronological order and find all these great gems. I mean, but think about him going through all this stuff. What if to his right is stuff from 2015 and to his left is stuff from 82? You know what I mean? Like where do you? It's such a massive undertaking that the fact that we're getting anything at all, especially at this rate and at this quality, I think it's awesome.
For
Well,
sure.
and honestly, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say was I was actually going to kind of almost disagree a little bit with what Kim kind of said earlier, which was, they could be releasing it faster. And honestly, in my opinion, they've been doing a pretty darn good job releasing it. And I could almost take fewer. Like, I love getting like 4 CDs worth of amazing, music that's from the vault and stuff, but that's almost too much to process at one time. Like they could literally be like, they could release quarterly albums. Take this disc, that's an album. Take this disc, that's an album, and just release them every few months. You know what I mean? And I would love that.
But that's what Tonya said though is that there is pressure to put out a lot of product into the market, and you can only imagine what the bills are maintaining this estate and things like that. So, and this is what's funding that. So
exactly.
I get a lot of people, like it or not,
I get a lot of people who are always like, they're only releasing that for the money. Well, yeah. That's what they're doing.
But they kind of need to keep making the money to
exactly.
But the issue is who's getting paid. Yeah. Because in his lifetime, Prince was, there's a recording somewhere where Prince talks about, I want my family to get my money. And he talked about record executives, and he fought against the system of the record industry in his lifetime. And as someone who spent many years working in the record industry, I can absolutely concur that it's a dirty business.
Yeah.
And part of the dirtiness of the business is the historic exploitation of African-American artists. Mm-hmm. So you have the family who are the heirs to the estate who don't seem to be getting any money off of it to this point. Whether you liked the relationship that they had with Prince in his lifetime or not, they're still his family. And he's on record saying, I want my money to go to my family. And then you have this estate that's, again, comprised of these varying entities. But the question is, if you don't know who's getting paid, then you don't know where the legacy actually will end up. So, for example, Michael Howell being the archivist, going through all this stuff, he's someone who is then making decisions about what gets put out when. But as I said before, if there were all these stakeholders in Prince's life who participated in his career being what it was, why is it that they are getting little say into what kind of projects are coming out at this point and into the future? We don't hear the estate asking any of you guys to say who are doing things around the scholarship of the estate. Yeah. No one is coming to you that I've been told and saying, hey, would you like to help us curate this project or that project? We have this going, whether it's for Paisley Park, whether it's for future releases or whatever. It is great that all of this music is coming out, but Prince also made 39 albums in his lifetime that some of them were readily available to people to explore. Now, some of them weren't, but he did make a ton of music that existed already before these releases came out. So I'm not saying that it's a bad thing for all of this music to be coming out, but as you said, Eloy, it's kind of hard to process it sometimes.
I mean, it's a lot sometimes.
You can get stuck in an album for a couple of months, like, wow, this is amazing. But
the way that I see it, honestly, with the choices that have been being made, they've been making choices that will, in effect, make them the most money. And there's a reason for that, because when Prince was alive, he didn't care about that. He made 90% of his money on tours. He'd be like, oh, I ain't got no money. I'll go do a few shows and I got money again. So he didn't care about how many albums he sold and stuff like that. He was just making the music because he was established. He had his own foundation. He could do whatever he wanted to as long as every so often he did a few shows.
But Prince did care about. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Casey.
I think we have to, on that angle, we have to look at the culpability of Prince in the last kind of 10 to 15 years of his life, by having the privilege to do that and go out and do a show and be like, yeah, I have a bunch more money now. The flip side of that is that when he died, there was basically no one person who knew all of his business affairs for a long time, right? So that person did not exist. So then they've had to inherit this, okay, trying to figure out, piece things together, which takes a long time. All right. So all the messiness and the pace of things and, you know, things going wrong and all that stuff, that's why that happened. So I think, you know, we have to like understand that, you know, he had the privilege of being able to not always look after his business affairs as a whole, but other people don't have that privilege.
Well, honestly, as it relates to recording artists, though, he did an amazing job of running both his brand and his business and his personal life while he was alive. I don't know how he had room to do all of that, because any one of those things could have consumed any normal individual. But I think one of the things that we know Prince cared about was ownership. And because the estate has been a little bit murky in terms of how the money is being paid out or disseminated or who's making it, I think that's what you see reflected in some of the choices. Yeah, of course, the music industry as an entity is always going to look at branding things to make money. And Prince understood that, which is why he wanted absolute control over his brand. I mean, the thing that's been so interesting to me as I've learned more over time is how much so many other people were invested in this one individual man's work. This was his life's work. Music is his, you know, he's the Mozart of our time, the Beethoven, whoever you want to say. And he wanted full control of what he did, because when he was in the studio 24 hours a day or whatever, I think that he certainly felt that, listen, I'm doing the work. I should own it. I should be paid fairly for it, which is why you didn't see all of his stuff on YouTube. And I should be able to control and have control over what it is that I'm in here doing. You know, that famous Kobe joke about his wife when they were in the midst of a divorce, and, you know, there was some rap lyric that said she wasn't with you shooting in the gym. And Prince was like, you weren't with me recording in the studio. Therefore, how much ownership or control should you have of my output? How much control should you have? I should have that control. And I feel like that's fair. So when I hear people talking about Prince in his lifetime and what he chose to do, I think he chose to live his life and do his music how he wanted to do. And I admire that greatly, because that is a tough thing to do in the music business when you're always going to have somebody running behind you trying to monetize everything that you do. And I think you've seen that in his passing, that everyone has now said, oh my God, Prince the brand, we can do something with this. We can make money. We can monetize it. And if it's fair to his work and his music and the life that we know that he lived, not the speculation, but the things that we know that he did because he was in the public eye doing them, then it's fair to say, do we have the people who are making the best decisions about his music in place? We don't control that. But I think that there should be some more input from the people, once again, that did help make him successful during his lifetime. So while I'm not upset about getting more music from Prince and having it packaged up and remastered and all those kinds of good things, you would at least like to feel that there are people who supported his career who would have more input into doing even more marvelously creative projects. To use an example, look at Muhammad Ali. You've seen over the course of his lifetime so many different projects and books and films and documentaries and all these varying things. Now, I don't know who was making those decisions, but you've seen a lot of output in terms of creative things as it relates to his estate. So again, you talked about Michael Jackson, Roy and Casey, and how those things have not happened with Michael Jackson. And I agree with that. So how do we determine with an artist that's so important to so many of us, how do we respect who he was in life by finding a way to do these creative and innovative, amazing things, along with having all these wonderful new releases?
Well, like I said, it's a massive undertaking, you know. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I think part of that is, I mean, because we've been speaking a lot about the individual albums, and maybe we could benefit from some additional curation and stuff. I know that like Jay-Z was brought in to help curate the originals, and you know, so they're making some strides forward. I feel like what we're getting a lot of is the stuff outside of the estate. I mean, or within it too. Like we have the celebrations, we have the symphonic tribute. Most of the people that have performed with him, they're coming out with their own, like the original MPG that's doing stuff. You know, you have the Revolution who's touring, and you know they're all doing these things in honor of Prince as well, not with the estate. Right. I also feel like obviously they play a part, and that I think they're the collaborators part of what you're kind of talking about. Right. But the estate could definitely do a better job of bringing them into the mix. The estate, making them more a part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, I mean, I think the estate and the celebration, I mean, look at what we're doing here. This is something that somebody put together on their own, came up with it, created it, put it together, and then, you know, to give D'Angelo all the credit, made it happen in the midst of the pandemic and global protests in a crazy news cycle. So that level of creativity and scholarship, I think we could see that certainly people are going to do that independently, and that's as it should be. But I think that under the aegis of the estate, we could potentially see more of those creative things if they were willing to be more collaborative. That's my point.
No, I definitely agree with you. The question that ends up popping up a lot for me is I'll have a lot of people, because I do a lot of comments and stuff like that on my YouTube channel, where people will be like, they should have Des Dickerson, you know, in there. And they should have the Revolution in there, and they should have Sheila E. in there. And I'm just like, what about any of the people who were working with him in the later years that actually might know more about what he was thinking, like what he would be thinking now?
Yeah. But when I hear those type of things, though, Eloy, it always comes from a place of idealistic kind of thing, because they have no idea what the relationship that he had. From what I understand, him and Sheila E. were very sour towards the end. People have these kind of pie in the sky ideas of like how they would want it to go. You know, there also has to be a little bit of responsibility that has to be, taken for why certain things. You talk about things getting out and things that shouldn't have, but the control that he had. There's a reason why the Revolution weren't touring by themselves during his life while he was alive. There's a reason why suddenly we can go see the Revolution, and I've seen the MPG. Why is that happening now? Are people looking at that as some sort of like, well, now we can cash in on it? No, it wasn't feasible to do that while he was alive. So as Wendy Melvin likes to say that we are the encore, echoing what Tonya said. People like D'Angelo and all of us here today, that this stuff meant so much to us that we're the encore. We're carrying on. But that control you mentioned earlier, there's also maybe a reason why, there's a need for this. Maybe I can't imagine a generation not hearing Prince's music, but his music is not readily available. For the longest time, it wasn't on YouTube. Remember how he would take it down? He didn't license it to movies. So it's not coming at you in a lot of different ways. So that's what makes this interesting, because now there's one entity, one singular thing that is responsible for what is going to happen next. What are they going to do in terms of being like the encore? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's kind of why there's this sort of disparity between people who really followed Prince over the last kind of 10 to 15 years of his life, and his experiments with distribution and doing things like NPGMC and really rallying against the major label system. And now, the estate really, they don't have much of a choice but to play into this major label system paradigm, because the brand is how they need, how they make money. They really, I don't see them. A lot of fans say, oh, wouldn't it be great if they opened up, an MPGMC again? And yes, it would for us. But as somebody that has been on major labels, I was signed to Sony, I was signed to Universal, I've released independent records. That access to high profile events and brands and award shows and media and stuff like that, that goes away when you stop working within that system. Prince and Prince knew that as well. And he tried to play both sides of that field. He went back to do distribution with Sony and Columbia for Musicology and 3121 and stuff like that to get that level of press coverage. And I think, when he did the Super Bowl and Grammys and stuff like that, he was back working with majors in some capacity at that time. I think the best example of this right now is last couple of weeks when the One Night Alone stuff got re-released through Sony Legacy, and I see all the major media websites like covering this re-release. I'm like, you didn't cover this release when it came out the first time around. That didn't happen. So it's really interesting to see that at play. But I really don't see the estate doing something, being like, yeah, we're going to do something independent for the fans and put a bunch of songs out, through a website or whatever. They're not going to do that. It doesn't make sense for them to do that. And that's, it's a shame, but it is what it is at the same time.
I think that the releases cover some of that, if the Sign of the Times release is actually happening, that would be great, because that is one of the albums that desperately needs remastering because of the sound quality of it at this point. But I do think it's important to say, and Roy, you made the point, there was a reason why the Revolution and different people weren't touring. It's because Prince owned all of that.
Yeah.
He was an African-American man in the music industry who owned all of those trademarks and owned all of and had all of the control over the time, the Revolution, and people using that name. Remember when the Time wanted to put out an album as the Time, all 7 members, they had to put it out as the original 7 because Prince owned that name.
And that's the point that I was making.
Right.
Afterlux, Afterlux from the family, right? Right. So I think it's important to understand what's happening with the estate in context of that, in context of the fact that he was about ownership and owning your trademark and controlling his output. And people disagree with Prince all the time about what he should do with his own work. But I think, do we disagree if LeBron James wants to control his trademark and put it all over T-shirts and do whatever he wants with it? No, because we understand that it is his work that is allowing for him to have this, to be able to sell anything, So I think it is important to look at Prince in context of the fact that whether you like the decision making that he did with his own output, he had the right to do it. In the history of African-American artists, and Casey, you spoke about being an artist, and I said, this is a dirty business. You know what artists go through of any stripe. But in particular, the output of African Americans in this music industry has been so exploited. You've got people who made all kinds of music and great, Michael Jackson, another individual who wanted control, who knew that ownership and owning his catalog and the Beatles catalog were things that made absolute financial sense. So when I look at the estate and the things that they're putting out and who's putting it out, I'm not complaining about every little release and mad because they didn't do this and that. I would like to see more footage. I definitely think that there are concerts. I understand there was musicology that was fully set to go. The things that we've seen at Celebration that have been fantastic that the rest of the world can't see, like the very first performance of piano and a microphone. But I think it's also very important to understand Prince didn't want his stuff on YouTube, not because he hated technology. Obviously, that's not the case. It was because he was sitting in that studio making those records. And I guess he was like, oh, you want to pay me 1 cent a stream? I'm not feeling that.
Yeah, right. No, for sure. I'm just talking about, but in terms of the culpability of the availability of it and what impact it might have now, because we're trying to talk about, of course, what's happening now. But I wanted to follow up on what you were saying, was that I worked for record labels for about 15 years of my life and actually left the record label because there was an issue where there was one African-American artist that I felt like that they weren't going to sign for a certain genre based upon his race. And I ended up leaving the label, ended up managing that artist and making sure that he did get signed to another label. So I understand how that works, and I understand what working within that system. I'm not a big fan of speculation. I don't like to do that, but I can't help but feel that as private as a person that Prince was, even his family, he had a lot of estranged, family members, and maybe his sister he was close with. But even they didn't really kind of know really what was going on in terms of, they didn't really have access to it. It was kind of what happened with Michael Jackson. As soon as Michael Jackson was gone, there was just kind of this almost predatory kind of thing with Michael Jackson. And I'm not saying that happened with Prince, but I feel like
it did.
Right, I'm trying to be nice here, but but
let's be honest.
Isn't there an aroma of a sense? Aren't you kind of get this sense of smell that there is suddenly these people who've never had access to this stuff, even when he was alive, are suddenly in the mix? Suddenly, like, and they never thought that was going to happen. They never thought that they were going to be in control. So I think that that's why that they're guarding this so close to their chest. No matter what PR statement they make about how important it is and how they want to do the right thing and make the right decisions, I feel like that for the very first time, unthinkably, they're sitting on the top of the mountain. They get the keys to the kingdom, and they're not really ready to relinquish that. So that speaks to what Tonya was saying about the lack of collaboration or bringing in people to look at it from a very academic sense, like we're doing here, which would only benefit, it would only streamline, it would only make things come faster, Kim. But instead, I think that they're just kind of like, no, not you, not you, not you, not you. It's all about us right now.
Right. And that's really my central point, that's the case, that again, there are a number of people that made Prince successful in his lifetime. And yet in this estate, we've gone from Prince the person, Prince the musician, to Prince the brand. And as fans and as people who care about his legacy, what do we want this brand to be? Because you will look 100 years later, you don't want to look at some Prince, well, we won't be here, but you would hope that it won't be some guy that we don't recognize. That isn't true. I mean, I look at Bob Marley, and I mean, I think the Bob Marley estate, obviously, he had 13 acknowledged children, I believe, and they share in that estate. And they've made money off of branding Bob Marley on T-shirts and on weed and on varying things. But in some respects, does that serve Bob Marley, the artist, in the activism that he had in terms of his artistry? And listen, these are his kids. So if they made those decisions, at least I feel like his estate and his life's work was able to benefit people that he cared about. And in Prince's case, it's a little bit more complicated because, he wasn't married. He didn't have children. He had varying and different relationships with each of the siblings that were his heirs. But again, that then lends it to us to step up and say,
we're the encore, right?
What can we do to press the estate for some of the things that we'd like to see? Again, the documentary. Ava DuVernay was going to do that documentary. Now that documentary is in the hands of Ezra Edelman, who did the OJ documentary. So may put Prince in a context of the world around him. I get a sense that Ezra may do that, but you do kind of wonder what happened with Ava. And again, who's really making those decisions? Yeah. Because one of the things that I will say about Ava is that Ava was an African-American woman who may have brought a different sense to the entire look of Prince's life, because I think women have been pushed aside to a certain degree in terms of his legacy, and African-American women in particular, because of the fact that for whatever reason, our importance to his legacy hasn't shown up quite as much. And I think that just speaks to a lot of the different things around Prince as an individual and the times and the music and the person. But I think there are things to say that are coming from sources that may not be the usual ones that we haven't heard yet, that are also important in adding to this understanding of this tremendous artist.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I actually have two great examples that I think illustrate that point. And number one is that many years ago, I had a small level of involvement with Tupac's estate. I knew Afeni to a small degree. I knew some of the Outlaws. I was very close with Johnny J, who produced All Eyes on Me. He was a very good friend of mine. And while Afeni and the Outlaws and people like that had a very tight level of control on his estate right after he passed, you saw amazing stuff coming out that was of a very high standard that felt like what he would have done if he had lived. And then when it got drowned out in legal problems and all these different people start coming in and out, then at the end of that side, and when these people are getting pushed out, you see Eminem remixing all of his songs with these terrible beats, slowing down his vocals. It doesn't sound anything like his music.
I know, right?
And that's exactly what happens when you push out those people. And the other example is look at the people running Michael's estate, and they're putting out fake songs. It's not even him singing. And then you imagine what if Janet was running his estate? Not that she necessarily wants to, but think about how amazing of a job she would do if she was the one making those decisions.
Right.
Well, I wanted to say something about Tonya talking about because I too feel like that there hasn't been the female representation, especially the African American female representation. But it's also a challenging thing, because think about the women in Prince's life. We all have our favorites, right? We all have the ones that we can identify with, right?
You're right.
But there was never one that was there for a long time. We all probably think that Susanna is probably the love of his life. But again, that's speculation. There's nobody there that was there for like 10 years, and then a couple that were there for 5 and a couple there for 1. They were all there about the same time. They were all there about a year and a half. You know what I mean? Some have lasted. Here's what I mean. Like you have Susanna, then you've got like let's see, you got Jill Jones has been there here and there, but I'm talking about there's not one definitive female artist in Prince's life that overshadows the rest of them. I mean, we all have our favorites. I disclaimed that in the beginning, but I think that's what makes it a little bit challenging. I would love to see that represented more. I would love to see all that Paisley Park. I mean, a lot of people think that he made a lot of those records what we could call girlfriend records. Like he was how he would meet people and how he would I guess become I'll make a record for you. Or I mean, that's how he was shy in that respect. And it's how he would communicate would be through his music. So we have a lot of that. We have a lot of that type of underrepresented part of his career that has been swept under the rug. Is just, again, they're looked at as girlfriend records, and they shouldn't be. They're a part of the history. These women had voices. They were there. They were a part of it. But since there's so much of it, that I think that that's why a lot of it gets lost. And I would like to see that be giving it more of a better of attention. You know,
well, I think that's where the politics between a lot of people that were around really comes into play, because some people, they just really don't want anything to do with another woman that was around at the same time or whatever, because they're still caught up on actually what Prince was the one keeping them all separated from each other. If you watch our interviews with people like Anna Fantastic and Elisa Fiorillo, he was like, no, like we didn't see any of the other people got any of the other girls that were around, because he made that happen. He kept that isolation, and they've all internalized that to a degree. Even Maite and Manuela, they've internalized that, and they can't get over this mental block to where this level of collaboration that should happen could happen. Right, and that's a very difficult thing to get.
Well, but I also don't mean just girlfriends or women. There were really great collaborators that he worked with. I don't know why. I feel like Nona Gay always gets erased out of his whole story for some reason, even though she made an entire record with him. And I mean, Nona's had her own struggles, so that's one of the reasons why she hasn't been as vocal. But there's also Janelle Monáe, and there's also Ashley Tamar Davis, and there's also Wanda, the bass player. Don't ask me her last name because I will mess it up. And there's also Third Eye Girl, and there's all these women that he worked with over the life of his career. Right, but they're all part of it. But there's fans, there's journalists, there's musicians who loved him or that he loved, and so just bringing in those additional voices in some kind of way. I mean, one of the things that the Sirius XM channel did, although they didn't do it through the life of his career, they brought in her to do a playlist. They brought in Andre to do a playlist, and Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and so many funny stories that came out of that. But that was just another way to show you different sides of his legacy and different people that he worked with and different experiences that he had. If I had any real, I mean, I guess I've had a few criticisms, but I think one of the things too is that Prince was an artist over 37 years, and yet his career has been narrowed down to the most commercially viable and feasible. And I think, Casey, you talked a little bit about that as well, that we've narrowed this man who had this very expansive career down to his most commercial period. And also a period of time when certainly he did some amazingly innovative things, and he was part of the biggest part of the pop culture zeitgeist. But as he moved on into the 90s, He did more funk. He did more R&B. His bands were very interracial, and he had people coming in and people out. But, you know, Morris Hayes, who was with them for 20 years, doesn't seem to get his just due. Whereas we spend a lot of time talking about people who were just there for 4 or 5 years. So that's one of the things that you'd like to see happen. But does that best suit the brand in terms of money making? I don't know. But
this is my biggest frustration with the mass media stuff. So like the Grammys tribute and stuff. Why is there only songs from 4 years? Like really 3 and a bit.
That's
like if you're really looking at it, that's so frustrating to me.
But it has to be for mass consumption. So that's why, I hate that. I mean, it's so frustrating. I love seeing him get his due with the Grammy thing, and I love to see it and seeing new people be exposed to this. Yeah. But again, his career did not last 3 or 4 years, man.
Right.
You know? Eloy, you made a disagreeing face when I started my sentence about there not being. I would love to hear your rebuttal. Like you had something.
Well, I mean,
really
it's because I'm very opinionated. That's why.
Go ahead, give us your opinion.
Say again, Eloy. What did you say?
I said because I'm very opinionated.
Okay, great.
No, it's the whole idea of because everybody thinks that they know who Prince's love of his life was.
Right. Like,
that's okay. Right. You know, he only had 2 wives. So my guess would have probably one of the 2 of them, because he at least took that extra step. But here's the thing, though, is that the estate would have you believe that the most important woman in his life is Sheila E. So that's also something that's part of the whole branding thing that we're talking about here.
I just explained that earlier.
There are so many other women in his life, such as Third Eye Girl, Shelby J, you know, all these other people. Judith Hill, exactly. Right. So there's a lot of them out there, and he is being typecast. Like, and that's one of the things that I, 100% attempt to do on a weekly basis. Is I'm like, hey, look, everybody, he was more than the 80s, and I love the 80s. That's a great foundation for his legacy. But he was way more than that.
Foundation, right? If you only have a foundation, you don't have a house. You have a foundation.
Right.
That's all you have, right?
Exactly. But one of my things that I have a lot to do when it comes to his legacy of his music, but also who he was and his brand, especially like today, with what's happening in Minneapolis and all across the US and the world at this point, is like my biggest thing that I try to do is I try to make sure that everybody understands he was a Black artist and he fought for, Black rights and against the injustices. Right. Sure. And I think that that's also part of, stuff that the estate is doing is they are kind of trying to whitewash him a little bit. And that's a criticism that I've had since the beginning. Well, I say a little bit because I don't think it's, even if it's an unintentional or, whatever, even like as a response to what's happening in Minneapolis, they released something that was handwritten. It was great, but it was like the most kind of milquetoast, kind of statement that Prince could have made, that he probably wrote in the 80s, and that's part of what's happening here is that the more that everybody says, well, Prince was best in the 80s, the more that we hear only the 80s stuff, the more people start to block out anything else. And they will attach themselves to these things. They'll be like, well, Prince says he didn't want, to be judged because he was Black and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, he also said, hey, stop trying to kill us because we're Black as well. Oh, well, Prince said to be colorblind. Well, he also said, do you know what it feels like to have to grip your steering wheel tight when a cop pulls you over? Like, you can't pick.
He also remade "When Will We Be Paid?" The Staples Singer song. But
so my whole thing is you have to take the whole dude, like, and that's I think that's part of the brand and the legacy and everything. And I think a large portion of what we're discussing here is that really I think I am waiting, I guess, for it to be in the hands of the family, because I've like followed the social medias and everything of the family members, and they're all like, yeah, we're gonna when it's us, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna promote him as the Black rights activist that he was and all that stuff. And I'm just like, I wish somebody would do that, because we're the encore, but the encore, we can only do so much. We don't necessarily have that level of institutional power to to really do things. Like I have a YouTube channel. I'm a talking head. I'm just a dude with a loud opinion. I'm just one of the louder ones. You know, it's like,
well, but don't discount that, because I think that's extremely significant. And I mean, you do get the sense that they're trying to MLK Prince. And when I say MLK Prince, it's people that take MLK quotes and take the ones that suit their mindset instead of seeing MLK as the real radical that he was in his time. Because now that he's gone, everyone's like, oh, he was great. He was about peace. But in his lifetime, people didn't like him the way that people think that they did.
That's right. He was very challenging. Yeah.
Right. So the point is, if you can't take Prince out of context of his time. There's a great book out there that somebody with way more patience and fortitude should write about how these artists in the 80s really changed the game in terms of how artists were perceived in terms of race. When you look at a Whitney Houston crossing over, when you look at a Prince crossing over, Michael Jackson forcing MTV to integrate their playlist, which sounds crazy to us now.
I know.
But it really happened. That was really a situation that MTV was like, well, we're not really going to play any Black videos because it doesn't really fit our culture over here of, you know, apartheid. But Michael Jackson forced them to do that. And then Prince came along with Little Red Corvette. And it's like, come on, what are you going to do now? Because these Black artists made that happen. So
and
at the
that's
same
how I got exposed to Prince was the Little Red Corvette video when I was 8 years old, and then just mesmerized, you know?
Exactly. And so undeniably what you're saying, Eloy, is that the brand wants him to be palatable, because let's be clear, it was sad and disheartening to me after he passed to find out how many Prince fans were a little racist. You know, there were a couple of people got told off on Prince.org when they tried to come in there and say that either Prince wasn't Black or that he was biracial or that, well, he didn't see people as whatever. No, Prince was Black. And I think a lot of Black fans have pushed back on this mindset of him as this, you know, special fairy, biracial, whatever, and said, listen, we don't care what y'all think. In our community, we got Prince, okay? He's over here with us. We don't own him solely, but he's coming out of this community, okay?
Yeah.
And
I laughed so much yesterday. I literally had to call out this guy on Twitter because there's like this neo-Nazi British guy with a Union Jack in his thing, and you know, like, and then he had this picture of his bedroom with like Union Jack flags everywhere, but there's a Purple Rain poster on the wall. I replied to this guy like, you know, Prince was a Black man, right?
And we all can agree on, right?
Right.
What's going on?
On a bit of a lighter note, there's one, I guess, posthumous thing that's come out since that most people haven't talked about. We haven't talked about it here. Is I was wanting to know did y'all read Morris's book?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I didn't.
Okay.
Sorry.
So to Eloy, to what you said about how you have to take the whole dude, right? You know, and what a dude we're talking about. You know, it's not like we're trying to figure out, you know, your boring uncle here, and we're trying to figure out this probably the most complex person of our time, right? But one thing I found annoying, I love Morris so much. We've had him on the show, and he's so great. If you go to our page, he and I are dancing on stage, and he's the man, right? But one thing is, if you know it, and Tonya, I'll fill you in here, is that Prince has a voice in Morris's book, but it's just what Morris is paraphrasing, that he thinks that it's Prince's voice in Morris's head. Right. Okay. So at one point, this is kind of, well, cool, man. This is kind of a neat kind of deal. But by the time you get to the second or third chapter, it becomes an exhaustive novelty to the point where it's frustrating to the point of almost anger, because you're almost at one point saying things like there is no effing way Prince would have said, or how do you know he would have said that? And it becomes a little, so here was a great format for Morris to shape and to give the whole dude, or as much of the dude he could give. I don't know. It felt like a swing and a miss. What did you think? What did you guys think? For those who have read it.
Yeah, I agree. And at the beginning, when you start reading it, it's like, oh yeah, this is funny, it's cool. And then, you know, it's like, oh, this is gonna be the whole book. It's gonna keep like this. It's like,
right. And the volleys are so in between. It's not like Morris talks for a long time and a little bit of Prince. It's like the I got it. You got. I got it. You know,
The whole time. Yeah, the whole book.
an entire book of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think he, he needed some kind of literary device to make it unique and make it Morris, because obviously he's got a co-writer on it. I think David Ritz, he's written a lot of books, different artists, but they needed that as a way to kind of lift it and make it into the Morris Day kind of persona as well. Sure. But it does like get played out pretty quickly.
Well, I mean, because he did have his voice and the Prince voice and the Morris Day voice.
Yeah, the Morris Day.
There were a bunch of different voices kind of going on. Yeah. I honestly thought that it was fine. I thought that it was like an interesting literary trick that no one else I had really done. So I was like, yeah, I'm down.
And for good reason. And I said for good reason.
The only issue that I had with it was the part where he inflected that in Prince's voice it said, yes, I wrote Pop Life about you, and Morris says, I always thought that, and then he goes, yeah, of course, man, because I was thinking about you. And I'm like, wait a minute here. Yeah. Like, and then everybody in the community was just like, Morris is dropping facts. Pop Life was about him, and I'm like, that's not what that said at all. Totally. Like, Morris just thinks it's about him. Like
to know me is to know that I have a lot of catchphrases. So if my friends were here right now to do an impression of me, they would say one of my silly catchphrases. That's allowed. But when you start making decisions that are shaping history and being accepted as fact, now we've got an issue.
Well, I mean,
you should read it though, Tonya. Though, regardless,
I should. Okay, I was wondering. So now that you endorsed it, I'll check it out because I felt like I read it because I saw every interview that Morris did about it. I didn't know what else he was going to tell me. So good to know.
I thought it was good. So to kind of let's move to maybe a slightly more positive thing here. Out of all of the posthumous releases, what has been your favorite?
Can I?
So Kim wants to start. Let's go there.
Yes.
I absolutely love like collecting records and collecting CDs and all that kind of stuff, because point being, like, me growing up in like the early 2000s and like all the way through like the 2010s, Prince stuff, especially like stuff like rave and like stuff that wasn't very like known in the mainstream and all that, was very hard to find. So if I wanted to get a CD or a vinyl or something, I would have to travel quite far to then try and find it, and then I still don't have a complete collection till this day because just couldn't find some stuff. So I loved the Emancipation vinyl release. That was amazing. Yeah, and I really do appreciate that they're re-releasing all of the albums and that they're also doing some vinyl releases, because I just really like that people will be able to like complete their collections if they haven't, or a newer generation can like know Prince but like know different years of like his work. And especially if albums were out of print before, you can bring them back. Someone will like pick up an album, maybe see the encore, it's like, this is interesting, I know Prince from like Purple Rain, but I don't really know like the other stuff they made. I might listen to it.
Nobody should have been deprived of One Night Alone piano just because they couldn't afford like $300 for it or something. That's too much.
I did a whole video on my channel that was, if your response to them re-releasing stuff is I already own it, just shut up, because it's not for you, right?
I had that on the bootleg 25 years ago. Okay, you got it. Now you have a better copy.
Exactly. I guess let's stay with the same window. Casey, what's your favorite so far?
I think it has to be 1999 Deluxe, just because I'm such a vault junkie. Just to have that amount of unreleased stuff on one set. Even if it wasn't quite comprehensive, I'm still a little bit salty about Extra Lovable and Lest You Always. But it is what it is. But what was on there was just, you couldn't ask for more if you're a fan of somebody's unreleased catalog and how that is a contrast to what they did release in their lifetime.
Right. All right. Who wants to go next?
Well, I would say according to my title playlist, it must be the title gives you what you've listened to the most for each month and then for the whole year. And I just happened to look at that this morning. And so according to that, it's 1999 was my favorite. I listened to that a whole lot.
Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to be a snob or anything, but again, when all this stuff comes out so far that are promising all this unreleased stuff, I'm sorry, but I look at my collection, I'm like, pshaw. Okay, I've had that for I'm having fun here, but I yet to get something where I'm kind of like, okay, now I'm actually going to hear a Prince song that I've never heard in any form.
Yeah.
And it's been many years. It probably will be since the phase 1 and 2, right? So it's been like 5 years. So when 1999 Tracklist came out, and that's the first thing I'm looking at is like, what won't I recognize? That's the key.
Yeah.
Is there going to be anything on here that I don't recognize? And is it going to be one song out of 300? Is it going to be 2? There was so much great stuff that I have never heard. Like I said, the Bold Generation or Public Music I'd heard, but not this good. But then there's songs on there like I'd never heard rearranged before. I know that it became something else later, but I'd never heard it. I didn't even know even existed. So that was fantastic. And again, if you guys get a chance to, I did an unboxing video where we do every little thing. And on a personal note, it comes with the best soundboard recording. I've had a bootleg of it for many years of the show from 82, 1999 in Houston. Where you're looking at right now is in Dallas, Texas. And my sister was at that show in 1982. And I've grown up my whole life hearing her be like, oh, yeah, well, you might have gone to all 21 nights in LA, but I was at the 82 show. So to have that from me on a personal note, to have that is fantastic. I wanted to add one thing, how you were talking about people go, oh, I used to have all of his stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm a record collector. If we were to point right over there, you would see a wall of records over here. But I even became a little bit complacent and lazy a little bit around the time Plectrum Electrum came out. I listened to it all the way through, and I thought it was cool, but I realized that I'd only had heard it through Tidal or whatever, you know what I'm saying, like through Spotify or any way to do it. And then about, I don't know, maybe this recently is maybe like a year and a half ago, I went to like a flea market, whatever, and I bought Plectrum Electrum on vinyl. I was like, oh, I don't have this on record. And I put it on, and I realized I'd never actually heard this record. I never heard it this way. So, I mean, I'm always one that's like, get the record. I'm like a snobby audiophile. But I listened to that Plectrum Electrum, and there was nothing about it that made me just completely fall in love with it, even though I love Third Eye Girl, and I love that. But there was nothing about it that made me just become obsessed. And now that I have it on vinyl on a great stereo system right over here, I can't get enough of it. So
I can't stop listening to it. I still listen to that one all the time.
So what I'm listening to right now is, of course, the massive box set and my love of Plectrum Electrum right now.
Yeah.
Well, this is why the reissues are so important, because there's still a lot of the material, specifically the 80s material, the CDs that came out, they actually came from like the tape masters and not the vinyl masters. So they were really, like, so the quality or the volume is really low on a lot of them. There's no dynamic to it. So, and that's what became when we came into the digital era. It's what's on streaming, right? It's the CD version that came from the tape, and it's completely different to the vinyl version.
Yeah. And to remark on something that you said, Roy, I get this all the time, and I know Kim does as well. The whole, you might have been at all of the shows at the 21 Nights in London, but I was there in 82. My response to that is usually like, I'm sorry I was 3.
Right.
I'm sorry I was 9 and 10.
Don't try to like age shame us. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
I mean, we should be happy that there's a new generation of Prince fans, but some of us who were there, like right while everything was happening, I think we do feel a certain sense of ownership, because we were watching it as it played out. And, even with everything that's going on right now, you recognize that kind of nostalgic history is a little bit different than lived history, but we want everyone to come to the party. We want everyone to be here and love him and experience him in new ways, because that's the way that every timeless artist gets experienced. I mean, no, I wasn't there when, I don't know, Frank Sinatra was in his heyday, but I can still appreciate his music now. I may not appreciate it in the same way, but the fact that it's timeless music means that you'll still appreciate it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And
that's why it's key to go to actually go back to a couple of the points from earlier discussion about getting the right people involved. And your mention, Roy, of the Houston show, I think I have to say, one of the best decisions that the estate has made in the recent releases was getting David Z to mix that audio.
Without question.
He's the only person that could have done that. Anybody else would not have trusted. Yeah. So long may that
not to mention him. So thank you for mentioning that, because that's without question whatsoever.
Did you really go to all
I feel confident. Let me say that I feel confident that if given that Prince is not here to oversee that live audio, that is as close to how it should or would have sounded to the people there.
That's how it feels. I agree 1,000%.
So did you really go to all 21 nights?
What, in Los Angeles?
In LA? All 21? Every show. Which one was the best? Number 7, 8? No.
Well, okay. I did a paper on it. Okay, where you can go to each and every single night. I write down the set list, notes from every single night. Something happened, who the opening act was. It's a whole thing I have on my website. You can check out if you'd like to. But all 21 weren't actually at the Forum. He did a show at House of Blues. He did a couple of kind of like when the live CD that has the after show from the London one. He kind of did that at the Forum. There was an area there where DJ where she did a show, and so he counted those as 21. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go to those as well. But what made it possible, and maybe you guys know this, maybe you don't, the tickets to get into the show were only $25. They weren't expensive at all. The show, I mean, if you, it's kind of a bit of a glare, but on this poster right here, I don't know if you can see it, but I have all the ticket stubs. I don't know if you can see them. I have them all listed there. But if you actually look on it, whatever, $25. I mean, not including fees. And he did, of course, in the round, like he did his 04 tour. So no matter where, there wasn't a bad seat in the house. Yeah. And I think a lot of it was a lot of those shows, not that they were undersold. I don't think they were initially $25, because I would be around people. I remember this Australian girl was next to us at one show, and she had spent thousands of dollars to be right up front. And I had just paid $25 at the window, 30 minutes. Because I think that there was some I felt horrible. I was like, let me buy you a beer or something, right? But it was like, I think he wanted to make sure that these shows were going to be packed, because what an embarrassment this would have been if he did a 21-night thing and suddenly people were taking pictures of this empty or half-filled arena. Yeah. So to make sure that they were filled, tickets, if you went to the window, because I didn't buy all my tickets in the first 2 nights I went to, I spent a lot of money too. And then somebody tipped me off. They were like, look, just go to the window on the day of the show. And I did that for the remainder. The other shows were private. I had invites too, thankfully. But yeah, all 21.
I hate you. Just want to say that.
When I was going to the For You Symphony thing, sadly, I was like, why are all these seats empty? Like it was a pretty good show too. Like they missed out, I think. In terms of favorite posthumous release, I'll go ahead and give my answer. I'm going last here. Mine, and it's kind of like a half release. Mine's Deliverance, actually.
Yes.
And it kind of got released for like a day, and then I got a copy, and then it got retracted. But honestly, for me, like I've always been a fan of like Prince's later work more anyway. So to hear this, like, you could hear that there was so much joy, and like he was expressing his like spirituality, religion, and everything in that music. It was socially aware, talking about Katrina and everything. I mean, I loved it, and it was short. It's like 15 minutes, but like I would pay a lot of money for that, like to actually get released. I think everybody needs to hear Deliverance.
Well,
it's just amazing.
Deliverance is fantastic, but I'm sure the estate have got him under complete grip. But I want to know why Ian Boxill, like, what conversation did you have with Prince where he felt like, I can fit this out, right? Because he's not stupid. There must have been one, right?
They issued a cease and desist, so I think they sued him as well, and ended up with a settlement of like $1 million. But everybody pulled it off of YouTube or off of Mixcloud or wherever anyway. So that's one I highly recommend too. I remember being in Minneapolis for the first celebration and just playing that over and over and over. It felt like it just was a message almost, like that album is something special, or that EP, I guess it is. But Ian knew He knew Prince ain't tell him nothing like that. He thought he was gonna get slick, or else he might have thought it was something that really he wanted to see out. You know, he must have loved that music. And I think that the Deliverance that we hear, he put the choir on it. I don't think that Prince originally had that choir on there, as I remember. But, you know, Ian was like, Ian told the whole story about how Deliverance happened and how it got made. But he couldn't have thought that Prince was like, yeah, go ahead, man. Come on. I don't think so. I think he tried to do it.
Well, like, I still love that release though, because I mean, for me, it's like the things that we've gotten so far, like, and tons of bootlegs on 1999 and all that stuff. Like, it's awesome, all these unreleased vault tracks. But like for me, it felt the most Prince, you know, because like a vault track CD is just a bunch of vault tracks. It's not telling a story. It's not in any particular order. You know, it didn't have that touch. Like Prince wouldn't put something on an album unless it fit with everything else that was on it, and it had a certain feel and tone. And I think that's also probably part of why, you know, I love getting all the vault tracks, but they're not necessarily as special to me as something like Deliverance. You know, like you can give me 4 hours of here's just 4 hours of Prince music. But if you give me like a 15-minute, really well curated, connected, emotional experience from Prince, I'm all over that.
On that point, can we talk about how great the I Feel For You demo release was? I thought that was a fantastic move, because that's just a little story in itself, right?
Oh yeah.
Putting that acoustic on the side A and then the finished song on the side B as a limited record store day thing or whatever it was, and that was brilliant.
I'm actually gonna come in and I'm gonna respond to Sam. Sam is saying it's a shame that all the people interacting all over the world can't interact with these various sessions, e.g. ask questions, QAs throughout Thought for the Future Symposium. So I have been noting some of the...
I got them. I was going to go to those next.
Yeah, let's do that. And then maybe also ask questions of the people, you know, I'll try to keep on top of them.
Okay.
So we're going to go to people that are asking questions.
Yeah, do you want to read them, D'Angelo?
Not really, but I can. I'll do it. I'll go ahead and do it.
Well, I mean, because what I'm seeing here mostly are comments, not necessarily questions.
Yeah, but let's see.
Where do I see that at?
It's under the people tab.
No, but I've just been sending them directly to Eloy.
Okay. Yeah.
To everyone. So Sam, you have the floor. If there's a question you want to ask, you can ask it. Okay, he said, I asked if we were going to discuss SOTT Deluxe.
Okay, yeah, that's the very first question was just, is this a real thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, is it? Yeah. Who knows?
Eventually.
Any of us know the truth?
I don't think anyone knows the truth yet, but I don't think Questlove would have done what he did unless there was some kind of guerrilla marketing thing going on.
Yeah.
What did he do? Did he play it during it, or play the track?
Basically, you could see his like playlist and what songs he was skipping through, and he basically skipped through most of what looks like Sign of the Times Deluxe in sequential order, like enough to where everybody could see what was going on. I don't think that's
Let me find out.
Yeah. Well, and that question specifically of like, is it real? Like, none of us work for the estate. None of us are, you know, part of the promotion team. You know, we can't just say yes. And probably if we did work for the estate, we probably couldn't say yes because it hasn't been announced. But
as I remember, Casey, you probably know this. When you have to register a release at some point with whatever, I forget whatever the recording rights, whatever. I don't know how early that you have to do that, but at some point they've got to officially register that release if it's happening. So that's when
this is why I think what they started doing was they would announce something like way in advance. Like, so, you know, in June 7th or whatever, they'll say, yeah, this is coming out in September or October. I forget what the gap was for 1999 Deluxe, but I think it was a bigger one to avoid that happening. They can register it, you know, closer to the time. And they've already announced it so that, you know, people aren't looking for these things.
Well, you have to have a catalog number. So how it would work is that if they were to go through like BMI or ASCAP, they would be issued what is called an IPI number, and that's called Interested Party Initials. So how that works is that when that number is assigned, so that's kind of a bit of a what do we call a spoiler in a sense sometimes.
Right,
You're
right.
anticipating something like a movie or a release. Once it gets an IPI number, then that's mean it's on the release schedule.
Yeah.
And that can be done pretty much after everything, the project's been signed off on, things like that. So if it hasn't been issued or they haven't filed for an IPI number just yet, whatever, then it's all speculation at this point. I feel personally, eventually it's going to happen. Why wouldn't it happen?
Right.
But we've been hoping that they're going to draw from that entire period, from Camille, Dream Factory, Crystal Ball, Sound of the Times, everything that was going on at the time. In the same way, I hope they do that with Purple Rain, with The Family and Jill Jones's record and everything that was going on. I hope it encumbers everything. So we'll see.
No. I think that the thing that makes it most likely that this is all like legit and it's the next thing is, my understanding is that Warner's lose the right to Sign of the Times after this year, and Sony get it, so they have to put it out now. So,
yeah, I did not know that. That's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. Okay, that's cool.
Warner is losing the rights to a lot of stuff after this year.
Well, it's statute of limitations in terms of distribution, but in terms of master licensing and sync rights, is that the same? Are they losing those as well?
I'm not too sure on the finer points of it, but my understanding is that basically the estate are letting Warner's have the soundtracks post this year, like Purple Rain, Batman, Graffiti Bridge, but that's it. And Sony gets everything else after this year.
Sony Legacy.
Yeah. So the estate.
Well,
sounds
Sony,
but in
Sony,
terms of
because Legacy is a separate thing.
No, I thought Prince's catalog reverted to Sony Legacy though, not Sony the major, but so it's still major, but Sony Legacy is taking over all the catalog stuff.
Well, that's just distribution though.
Okay.
Right. Well, because there's Sony and then there's Legacy Records, and Legacy, like for instance, Legacy Records has been mostly in charge of like the re-releases and all of that stuff. Whereas Sony, I think the larger, they're going to be in charge of the vault material and actually putting out new albums. Legacy is going to handle the older albums.
The record business is so convoluted, people. That's why you can't figure stuff out. So many different.
That's why I left.
Right, exactly. Now, what was that artist you were telling us about? Who was that?
What, earlier?
Yeah.
So the guy, his name is Claude Cohen Jr. He played in a band called Ween for many, many years out of Philadelphia. Okay. And he has a solo band called Amandala, which of course is Swahili for the word power. Mm-hmm. And he's unbelievably awesome. And I cannot recommend him enough. He's not only a great friend of mine, and he's like a family member to us. So if you guys know, Ween is like this band in America that's like a band either you've never heard of them or they're your favorite band. Mm-hmm. So it's Ween. Okay, so I worked with Claude Coleman Jr., their drummer, for many, many years, and helped him put out a lot of his solo records, and we did tours and stuff together. And he's my brother, so check him out for sure.
Cool. Okay.
All right, I want to get through some of these questions from the audience, and if just because of the time, if we could pick up the pace in terms of how we answer them, only because I want to try to get more questions in from the audience.
Sure.
So Jonathan Harwell asks, most anticipated new releases?
Well, again, Sign of the Times.
I think we covered that with Sign of the Times.
Yeah, I think we covered that.
What I will say is, my answer is, I really, really want the footage to the piano and a microphone release, the 2016. I want that.
The very first one that they've shown at Celebration.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
If they could give me that instead of Sign of the Times. You can keep your Sign of the Times if I get my piano and a microphone. Just saying.
It's kind of criminal that hasn't come out, because it really is an amazing show.
I agree. I thought it should have come out when The Beautiful Ones, the book, came out. I thought,
that would have been perfect.
Yeah,
I don't know what the holdup is on footage. I can't understand it, but
I'm with you, Tonya. I want the video footage. There's a lot of it. Next question from Pam Weiss. I've asked about Joshua Welton.
What about him?
Joshua.
Yeah, I see the original question was, seems like the Weltons have moved back to Minnesota. Do you think Joshua Welton might be doing more with Paisley Park and the estate now? It sort of felt that way. I don't know.
I would say having a lot of babies right now. I don't know what they're doing.
So I mean, I don't even know how to answer that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we can't say unless it happens.
Nobody knows.
Kim sounds like she knows something she's not telling us. Kim, what are you telling us here that we don't? Kim's like, oh my God, I can't keep it in any longer. Like,
So Zach Spencer asked, do y'all think this Netflix doc is ever going to come out?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say yes, it's going to come out because Ezra Edelman is doing it, and he won an Oscar for the O.J. Simpson documentary. I also think that the success of The Last Dance, even though it was in a pandemic, so everyone was watching it. For those who maybe don't know, The Last Dance is the documentary about Michael Jordan and the 1988 Bulls or 98 Bulls winning their last championship. I think the success of that in 10 parts is probably going to make for a better Prince documentary, because if Michael Jordan and the 98 Bulls can get a 10-part documentary, I think Prince is deserving of one. I think Made in America, the OJ doc, was about 5 episodes. And I feel like it may not happen this year because production and all of that, but I definitely think that is going to happen. And I will be really interested to seeing how many episodes and how Ezra approaches it.
Yeah, I got that as well. And just real fast, if you guys have not seen The Last Dance, do yourself a favor. But I think that there's only a way to tell that story is in 10 parts or more. And the fact that The Last Dance succeeded in that gave me hope that the Prince thing will happen as well. But The Last Dance is the greatest thing. As a filmmaker, it's the best thing I have seen in forever.
All right, Nadine Rivers Johnson, what do each of you think about the idea of an original series of releases, and what would you want to see on the next one?
Yes. But maybe if they could dial down the reverb on some of the mixes or mixers.
Wow.
But yeah, absolutely. It lends itself so well to like 5 or 6 or 7. There's so many songs he gave away. I want With This Tear that he gave to Celine Dion. I want The Halls of Desire that he gave to Tevin Campbell. There's so many. So yeah.
All Day and All Night is the one song for me that was on the Jill Jones record that has never. You might have probably heard her version. You might have heard his version that he did, but it's so inferior in terms of its recording. That song by itself is a career. So if there's any song that I really felt like should get the real treatment, I would love to hear, it would be that one for sure.
I will say that I did an entire video about like 15 to 20 songs that I would love to have on there. So if you go to Prince's Friend on YouTube, you can go watch that video, and that saves us a little bit of time here.
I don't care about the originals as much, but that's just me.
Why? I'm curious, Tonya.
I just like hearing the stuff that he did. He made so many albums, and there are so many songs on those albums that I feel like I'm still wading through. So for me, Prince's passing was really devastating. But one of the good things that came out of it was having access, as Kim was saying, to so much more music.
Yeah.
Music that wasn't readily available. So, I'm still trying to get through Chaos and Disorder and 2010 and, all these other albums that I admittedly really never paid that much mind to when he was here. And then the last 2 albums, Hit and Run, I think somehow they just didn't hit the cultural zeitgeist as they should have. And I would love to see those re-released before I would want to go back in the vault.
But the song he did with Nona, Baby Go Go, that's in my top 3 of my favorite Prince songs ever. Okay. Yeah, that's the bit. That when it starts with that drum beat, that dun dun dun, like my life is just better because of that. So those 2 would be mine.
All right. Legally Leah says, what does the panel think about celebration and what they'd like to see at future celebrations at Paisley and in the city?
Well, I've been to 2 celebrations, and both of them were amazing fun. The first one, obviously, very sad, and then I was able to enjoy myself more the second time. I wasn't, currently in mourning. But I think that the celebrations are as key to continuing the legacy as anything, and that's kind of what I was kind of remarking upon, like the collaboration part that Tonya was talking about, is like at the celebrations, that's where we actually get to hear the words of the people that worked with him. We get to see them perform, and especially like the Funk Soldiers, like, that's a lot of the people who worked with him in the later years, and they're up there celebrating not just his 80s hits, but his entire catalog. And it's funny when you go to something like Celebration, because, I expect everybody to just be like me and just entrenched in the whole thing. But, you know, night one of the Funk Soldiers, everybody's singing along to 1999 and everything. And then the second night, I'm jamming out to Act of God, and everybody's like, what song is this again? I'm like, Act of God, you better recognize.
Yep.
You know?
Right.
And that's, you know, so even the people, and that's kind of a weird thing about Celebration, because you have to be a really big, you know, friend to go to Celebration because it's expensive as hell. And it's interesting because I feel like the people who are going there and they're really expecting it to just be this big 80s thing, I feel like even they're walking away with more, and they've learned more and have been exposed to the later stuff. And, you know, so I think it's intrinsic that it continue going.
All right. So just to keep, I'm very conscious of time. Time is really important to me. And we're at 4:30. This was a fantastic discussion. And for the people who are currently in the chat who actually want to actually come on camera, we don't have that functionality for the stage. Hop-in doesn't allow that. However, in sessions, you can actually turn on your camera. In the black area in the top right-hand corner, there's a share audio and video. And the PRN Alumni Foundation has some very special guests in the expo area in their booth. Yeah. So if you want to have like more direct interaction, I was told that Ingrid Chavez would be here. I was told that Dave Hampton would be here. Jackie Thompson should be here from the PRN Alumni Foundation. Also, Sam Jennings should be here. So I don't know if they're showing up because I've been here with you guys. I didn't want to, I kind of wanted to make sure things, so I don't know if who is here, but there's a possibility that others might show up. So if you really want to have that interaction, you want to go to Expo and you want to go to the PRN Alumni Foundation's booth. So they're going to be doing that from 4:30 to 5. That's also a time where if you're an introvert and you don't want to do that, you can grab some food and maybe watch from afar, because up to 500 people can watch, and we don't even have that many right now. So everybody and their mama could go to the expo booth right now and basically participate. You can have up to, I think, 5 people, actually no, 10 people in the booth, but there's going to be a lot of PRN alumni in the booth already. So that's one possibility. I want to also talk about the next panel because I'm super excited about it, because I'm a massive Pandemonium fan. So when we return at 5 o'clock, we're going to have a Pandemonium panel. So if you're a Time person like I am, and I'm super excited that the Time retweeted.
I saw that.
Yes, I was like,
I saw that.
Because I love me some Pandemonium. I love the Time. So if you're with me, we're going to be here at 5 o'clock for Pandemonium. Thank you so much for this riveting discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, D'Angela. Thank you for all
nice
of your
to
hard
hang
work.
out with everybody.
Definitely.
I've seen you guys at Celebration. Maybe we'll see you next year, Roy, or this year, whenever it's going to happen.
Well, I was supposed to go this year, and it was going to be my first year. But I hope to see all of you in person. This has been a blast. And again,
this is really fun. Thank you. Thank you, D'Angela, for everything you've done to make this a wonderful event.
Thank you so much. So everybody go to the expo booth or move your bodies.
Right.
So to Tonya, Casey, Kim, Eloy, and again, all thanks to D'Angela. Thank y'all so much. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good to see everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Eloy.